When last we left our intrepid adventurers, Paladin Henry retreated before meeting Australia's father, and the party had a late-night rendezvous with Priestess Morgan, and she revealed a hideous artifact. Marcus recoils from the revealed head as the eyes flicker open. They all know that they're looking at the severed head of Jacquenis Deborah Ceylon, the murdered queen, and Jun's mother. Marcus wants to know what in the lady's grace has happened here. Morgan relates that while on an adventure as a young priestess, they had liberated from evil creatures a drop of something called eternal essence, a liquid that makes a person near immortal. The drop only manifests once every 1,000 years. She and her companions took the drop that was supposed to go to the Emperor of Magadril and gave it to Jacquenis Deborah. Apparently, that's what was keeping her severed head in a semblance of life. Morgan said that she had prayed to the goddess, and the goddess had given her a way to make Deborah better, even if it just meant receiving a good death. Morgan wiped a tear from her eye and said that's what she wants to do, to make her friend whole again. The eyes of the head close, and the mouth works as if it's trying to talk. Morgan continues that they know the location of Deborah's body. However, it's on another plane, and 2 people have already disappeared trying to retrieve it. One of them was a paladin that had been hidden all these years in a place through a gate. His name was Avarsis Drudagor, the son of a famous paladin, Faramir Drudagor. The party ponders this, and Marcus slowly asks the question that everybody is thinking about. He asks, who was the other person? Morgan nods and said that it was her daughter, Marcus's wife, Priestess Tanis. Of course, that decides the question as to whether the party is going or not. Morgan asks to speak alone with Marcus, but the paladin storms off to get his equipment. Scala slowly shakes her head at Morgan and says, this is not the way to heal the rift between the two of them. Morgan can only say in her defense that at the time, there was no one else who could attempt the quest. Keberdane doesn't know what to say. He mentions that he's going to find Seraph and Paladin Henry and tell them to get ready to leave. Later, everyone is gathered at the temple near the coast. One of the Novit priestesses, Mary, that Morgan picked up in Gaul, is talking to her as the party arrives. Before Morgan can say anything, Marcus chimes in that he's ready to go. Novit Mary gives him a look, and with an otherworldly voice says that this adventure will change his life. Paladin Marcus holds his tongue. For once. Morgan explains that Mary has the voice of Chaldicea in her, and she speaks with the goddess's authority. It is through her that they can find and locate what they're looking for. They all prepare to leave. Seraph gives Lissa a long kiss goodbye and money to live on. Scala has changed into her traveling clothes, as has Keberdane. Last to appear is Akai. She said she talked to Paladin Henry, and he says that he's not going to be going with them. He's going back to where he came from. He needs to pray and get closer to his god. The party begins the short walk to the shore of the inland sea. Seraph looks around for a boat. He asks how they're going anywhere without a boat. Mary, the voice of the goddess Chaldicea, motions towards the water, and a sailing ship that looks like it's made out of blue light rises from the water. She says that this is not a ship of the lady. rather a creature that travels between planes and is being of service to them. She tells them that the trip will be short, and it's best that they stay on the decks of the vessel and not explore the below decks. They all climb onto the ship, and despite not having a crew, the vessel sails. From the beach, Paladin Henry sees the ship leave. And as it goes, he can see it lose some of its pretty trappings, and it becomes dark and dingy, and more like a ship of the dead. They examine the ship. Doors and windows seem to have been shuttered closed from inside. Seraph sits down next to one of the portholes, waiting for the journey to end. He hears voices inside the cabin. One of them addresses his by name. Seraph whispers back, asking what it wants. The voice says it wants to warn him. Seraph asks, what does it want to warn him about? The voice says that the party will betray him and hand him over to the evil queen. Almost laughing, Seraph asks the voice how it knows this. The voice says that it has seen his future. Seraph asks who the voice is that knows so much about him. The voice says that he is the real Seraph, and the Seraph outside on the deck is his past self, and he goes to his fate now. But this Seraph is trying to help him avoid it. Seraph stops listening and goes and sits somewhere else. The rest of the party is searching the deck, and they spy a shrouded person standing on the prow. Scala mentions that they were warned about creatures in the ship, but not about other passengers. Morgan steps forward and hails the figure. It removes its cloak, and it looks like an older man with red hair, wearing heavy armor and carrying a sword. On his shield is the symbol of Desolata. The man smiles and identifies himself as Faramir Drudagor. Morgan and Marcus realize that if this man is who he says he is one of the most famous paladins in the Chaldite church history. Kepperdane says that he's read about this man as the one who fought in the Red Hat Wars and turned back the Red Hat invasion. But he died. Faramir agrees that he is that man, but says that he was not killed. Rather, he was allowed to enter Chaldite heaven on his own terms, and through the grace of the lady has returned to Mper to save his only son, Avarsis Drudagor. Mary, the voice of the goddess, confirms his claims, and the party accepts Faramir into their group. The ship and its passengers continue on. There does not appear to be any water under the ship at this point, and the stars seem different to what they're used to. Mary tells them that they are between the realms of existence. To the starboard, they see a blinding silver band of light. The ship steers along it, and everywhere they look, they see giant frozen figures trying to poke through the band of light. Kepperdane identifies the band of light as something called the barrier. He says that when the barrier was raised by the dead gods, many of the creatures from before the barrier tried to pierce it. He says that on the other side of the barrier, there are no laws. Time itself runs in many different directions at the same time. If they were to sail through the barrier, they would be trapped there forever. The ship gets closer and closer and closer to the barrier. Finally, the vessel begins to parallel it. Ahead, they see a giant whirling rock with a castle carved out of stone. There is a dock, and the ship attaches itself. Mary says that she has to stay with the ship so that it doesn't leave them until their mission is done. The rest of the party climbs onto the stone pier and looks around. Beyond the pier, they see several passageways that lead deeper into the fortress. Morgan casts a spell which suggests which one of the tunnels is the best to follow. Carefully, they enter. The stone in the tunnel is crumbly. Marcus thrusts his gloved hands into the wall. The stone bleeds as he pulls them back out of it. Akai notices distorted faces are melted into the stone. It seems like creatures have been fused into it. Suddenly, several men in black armor stumble out of a hidden passage. The combat is very close. Marcus and Faramir moving in to protect Morgan, who lights up her staff and encourages the paladins to worry less about protecting her and more about bringing the combat to the Black Knights. Seraph protects Khepridane, since they're way too close to throw spells. Scala steps away from the combat and throws some damaging spells as a couple of the armored attackers come close. She takes a sword thrust to the arm, but it's turned mostly by a parry from Akai at the last minute. When the armored opponents are put down, the party notices that the suits are empty. Khepridane says that was probably the reason why they fought so slow, but they need to be careful going forward. The party decides to follow the corridor that the suits of armor came out of. After a long while of going through twisting and turning passages, it opens into a gallery. Akai goes forward to spy out the area. It's a huge amphitheater, and there in the upper seating, down below on the stage, are a couple of people bound to stone blocks. The first is a naked red-haired man that Faramir identifies as his son. The other body is of a headless woman. The third person on the stage is a woman, naked, except for a helmet that covers her entire head. She seems to be reciting spells. Akai notices that waves of energy seem to be emanating from the man and the corpse. The energy is feeding into a large, fleshy receptacle like a stinger high above the stage. There are two passageways down to the stage. They decide that Faramir, Scala, and Marcus will go down the left, and Seraph, Khepridane, Akai, and Morgan will go down the right. Morgan disagrees, and using the lady's power, she shimmers and floats off of the ground. She is going to make a direct attack across the intervening space. The two paladins and Scala make good time down the aisle. Bolts of energy from the mage clear away the suits of armor that have started to head towards them. On the left side, Seraph and Akai are running at full speed to gain as much ground before something gets put in their way. Khepridane does his best to get a spell of protection off between labored breaths. Morgan walks through the air and is making good time until she comes to a screen that stops her from continuing. Faramir, Marcus, and Scala are at the lip of the stage. The two paladins decide that they're going to split up. Faramir will go and release his son. Scala will continue to attack the suits of armor that have begun streaming in, and Marcus will retrieve the body of Jacanis Debra. Seraph and Akai are having a problem moving forward as a glut of suits of armor are now in their way. Their forward momentum is very slow. Morgan goes to the right, feeling for an end to the invisible barrier. Faramir gets to his son as a group of the armored suits arrive. He smashes them and then unties his son. On the way to Debra's body, Marcus is attacked by the helmeted naked woman, who's wielding an axe. She cuts into his armor and drives him back for a second. Morgan has found the edge of the screen that has kept her from getting to the stage. She alights and becomes solid again, just as Seraph, Akai, and Khepridane break past the logjam and take on the armor that's on the stage. Marcus and the woman are locked in combat. The woman parries, but Marcus gets past it. His strike removes her head, which goes flying across the stage. The panel in the front of the helmet springs open, and the face of Tanis, Marcus's wife, Morgan's daughter, is clearly seen. Marcus has accidentally beheaded his wife. Morgan wails at the death of her child. Next time, why was Tanis turned evil? And can she be saved from death?
We are the Architects of Entropy, a collaborative world-building tabletop role-playing actual play podcast. In other words, my friends and I create exciting, weird worlds and then we play in them. Join us for our introductory story as we play Dungeons and Dragons in a homebrew high fantasy world populated with dwarves, elves, fairies, and anthropomorphic weasels. What's going to happen next? We have no idea. Join us and find out. Architects of Entropy, a podcast.